Everyone thinks they know how the Band of the Hawk died. They think it was inevitable. That history itself was written to ensure Griffith would become femto. But history is only the story told by those who lived long enough to write it down. There are other paths no one speaks of, because the ones who saw them never came back. One of those paths begins in a rotting village, weeks before Griffith ever saw the inside of a dungeon. And in the center of that village sat a monster who wasn't supposed to matter, Wyald, leader of the Black Dog Knights. A man Midland kept on a leash so tight you could almost hear it strain every time they set him loose. They said he was useful for crushing rebellion. What they didn't say was that sometimes after a battle, there weren't enough survivors to even bury. The smell hit before the sight did. Guts, Casca, and a handful of scouts from the Hawks rode in, following rumors of a massacre. Houses broken open, animals skinned alive and hung in doorways. And in the center of the square, Wyald sat cross-legged, his massive frame hunched over something small. At first, Guts thought it was a head. Then it moved, flesh pale as candle wax, a face pressed into its surface, eyes opening and closing without rhythm. The crimson Behelit. Wyald didn't know its name, but the second Guts saw it. He did, and the second Guts' hand went for his sword. Wyald smiled, wide enough to split the scars on his cheeks, and tucked the thing into the flesh of his own chest, like it was part of him. They say the Behelit comes when your despair reaches its peak. But Wyald was already at the peak. There was no dream to shatter, no love to lose, only the constant gnawing urge to hunt. That night, Wyald dreamed. In it, he wasn't in the village. He was in a black ocean. Voices whispered from under the surface, their tones patient but hungry. "Call us when you're ready." He woke laughing, the kind of laugh that makes dogs hide under beds. Days later, the order came from the king. The Band of the Hawk had betrayed Midland. Griffith was gone. The Hawks were fleeing. Wyald's Black Dog Knights were to hunt them down. When Wyald found them in the forest, it was a slaughter. Soldiers screamed as his massive apostle form ripped through them. Guts cut his way through black dogs just to reach him, each swing of the dragon slayer chipping away at Wyald's inhuman hide. And then Guts landed the wound. The blade tore through Wyald's jaw and out the back of his neck. Wyald staggered, not in pain, but in rage. The fact that this human had hurt him was unbearable. And in that moment, the Behelit's eyes opened, the mouth stretched wide, and the forest was gone. The air became heavy, like breathing through wet cloth. The ground melted into an ocean of flesh. The God Hand appeared, their forms towering in the void. This was not their chosen time. Slan tilted her head, amused. Conrad twitched in curiosity. Ubik whispered in circles around Wyald's mind. And Void simply stared. "Sacrifice," he said. Wyald didn't think. He offered them everything, every soul in Midland, every man, woman, and child he had ever seen, not out of grief, not out of loss, but because they were his prey, and no one would take them from him. The God Hand accepted. Wyald's body convulsed, bones snapping like dry branches. Fur darkened to a black so deep it reflected no light. His frame stretched, muscle twisting into armor-like plates. Wings sprouted, jagged and broken, like the remains of creatures who had burned in heaven's fire. His face barely resembled a beast anymore. It was a mask of raw hunger stretched over an unkillable frame. When the void faded, Wyald stood in the ruins of the forest. The Band of the Hawk was gone. not sacrificed in ritual, simply erased. Griffith, Casca, Judeau, all of them. History never knew they existed. The next morning, Midland's capital awoke to silence. No soldiers marching, no distant horns, only the sound of wet, dragging footsteps. Wyald entered the city, not as a knight, but as something else. His wings scraped the walls as he passed. Every man who tried to bar his path was torn in half before his sword even left its sheath. There was no speech, no declaration. He simply sat upon the king's throne. The king's remained still warm beneath him, and ruled by one law. If you breathe, you serve me. Without Griffith, there was no charismatic leader to rally the remnants of the Hawks. Without the eclipse as it was meant to be, there was no femto to take his place among the God Hand. But that didn't mean their plans stopped. Wyald became their blunt instrument, a ruler whose cruelty drowned kingdoms without the need for politics or prophecy. Only one man lived through that night in the forest. Guts. When the Behelit activated, something in him, pure, stubborn rage, resisted the pull of the other world. He woke buried under the corpses of both hawks and black dogs alike. Casca was gone, and in the weeks that followed, rumors began to spread. A black armored giant on the throne of Midland. Villages burning not for war, but for sport. Guts didn't care about kingdoms. He cared about one thing, finding the monster who took everything before he even had a chance to save it. It took months of hunting to breach Midland's capital. Wyald sat alone in the grand hall, chewing on what had once been a knight's arm. "You," Wyald said, voice dripping amusement, "are the one who made me bleed." Guts didn't answer. The dragon slayer was already swinging. The battle was hopeless. Wyald's new apostle form healed faster than Guts could cut. Every blow that landed shattered walls, pillars, whole sections of the throne room. But Guts didn't stop, because he wasn't fighting to win. He was fighting to make Wyald remember what pain felt like. Mid-swing, the air shifted, shadows deepened. The God Hand silhouettes appeared along the edges of the throne room, their expressions unreadable. Slan leaned forward, eyes glinting. "He struggles so beautifully." Void's voice cut through the chaos. "This was never meant to be your era, Wyald." Wyald roared, ignoring them, his focus locked on the man before him. But the words were a sentence. The floor beneath them began to dissolve into the same living ocean from the eclipse. Wyald thrashed, trying to cling to his throne, but the tendrils wrapped around him, dragging him into the abyss. The last thing Guts saw before the void swallowed Wyald was that wide, furious smile, the look of a predator denied his prey. And then, silence. The throne room was empty, the city abandoned. Only Guts remained, staring at the spot where his enemy had stood. Somewhere deep in that black ocean, the God Hand whispered to themselves. The timeline was restored. But this time, they had learned something. They could make anyone into a god, and they could take it away just as easily.